There's a lot of things that need to line up to make this prophecy come true, which is why I think your odds of winning the lottery are going to be better than this specific situation happening. We were kind of talking about this, and I said it's like one of those things that, like, it's technically possible, but you may as well buy a lotto ticket because your odds of winning the lottery are going to be way better than this specific scenario happening. There's a lot of different pieces that need to be put into place procedurally in order for this to come true. The first thing is the state of emergency. So what happens in a state of emergency is the prime minister needs the support of the cabinet in order to call a state of emergency. They call the state of emergency, and then they have to vote on it in the House of Commons. So if the House votes it down, then there's no state of emergency. So that's number one. And I think that it would be voted down, even if they tried to do it, because of what happened last time, number one. And number two, all the opposition parties are absolutely done. Like, they are ready for an election. They're not going to support a government in a Emergencies Act. And then with the Emergencies Act itself, you have to meet specific criteria. The reason that the 2022 call of the Emergencies Act is currently in court is because they tried to say, oh, it's an economic hardship or it's an economic emergency. And the lower court decided that, no, that's not something you can call the Emergencies Act for.
Yeah, that
so if they were
count.
to do this again, it would be the exact same thing, an economic emergency, which the first time they haven't been permitted to call the Emergencies Act on. It was determined by the judge that was inappropriate. Now it is being, it's an appeals court right now, and we're actually going to find out about it, I think, on Tuesday, what the decision was. But as it stands right this second, you cannot call the Emergencies Act for economic issues, which is what they would be doing in this scenario.
Right, because the main criteria for the Emergencies Act is a threat to national security. That is one of the main criterias. We actually unpacked this when the ruling came down from the judge, so you can you can actually check that out if you want later on.
It's somewhere in our back catalog.
But we actually unpacked it. So the Emergencies Act refers to the CSIS Act, where national security is actually defined, because it's not defined in the Emergencies Act, it's defined in another act. And there is no economic case for a threat to national security in this manner. So the other issue is that they held an election during COVID. They held an election during a previous emergency.
Right. That's the other part of this thing, is that constitutionally we need to have an election every 5 years. I think in the Constitution it says in the fall of the 5th year, in October of the 5th year.
And that's what all these people are pointing to.
Right. But overriding that right now, we have the Canada Elections Act. And in order to push back the set election date, which is, I believe right now it's October the 20th, they have to create a new act of parliament. So that's what they were trying to do with Bill C-65, where they were going to amend the Canada Elections Act. They were trying to push that date back by 1 week, and they needed an act in order to do that. Parliament's been prorogued, so that act is dead in the water. Now, the other thing that they could do is repeal the Canada Elections Act and get rid of that. But that still needs an act of parliament. You can't just call the Emergencies Act and say, okay, well, now the election's going to be in 2026. It doesn't work that way. You need to do something with the current Canada Elections Act.
Right. So not only would the NDP, who has no interest in aligning with themselves with the Liberals right now because of the stench of their brand, not only would the NDP have to vote in confidence of the government to actually allow them to continue, they would also need to vote to essentially move the election as well. So
there's a lot of things that need to line up to make this prophecy come true, which is why I think your odds of winning the lottery are going to be better than this specific situation happening. Another thing is that we have only moved back an election once, and that was in 1916. Not only was the Great War going on, this was the biggest war pretty much up to that point. Canada was involved in Europe.
There had never been a war this large on the face of the earth.
Right. It was the Great War. They never thought there would be another one. But Parliament also burned to the ground in 1916. It was in February of 1916. The only thing that was saved was the library. So the politicians literally had nowhere to hold, like the House of Commons or the Senate. The center block was destroyed. It was gone. And I mean, it was 1916. Internet didn't exist. Zoom didn't exist. They couldn't just conference call into a debate. They had nowhere to go. And because Canadians were demoralized and they literally had no place to hold Parliament, the election was pushed back by 1 year, and they needed special permission from the king himself.
And I'm just going to jump in here and read this one right now. Ravi says with $5 super chat, Singh's getting his hand slapped by his caucus was hilarious in those press conferences. Right, it was so obvious. Yeah. It was so obvious that right after these press conference appearances, he literally got, somebody came up and slapped him upside the head, and it was probably Peter Julian. You could tell.
Oh, you could see him in that one video. Julian was staring daggers into his back. Like, it was just insane.
But this brings up a really, really important point. If you recall, everybody, I was supposed to try and find this clip, but I wasn't able to find the time. About a month or two ago, recall that we started warning everybody about what was going to happen. And what we were warning everybody about is that you're going to see a lot of sensationalism, you're going to see a lot of fear-mongering, and you're going to see a lot of doom and gloom from a whole bunch of people that you're used to getting information from. Now, I don't blame Brian Lilly too much because his job is to report on possibilities. That's literally his job. And he didn't say this was going to happen. He just said this could happen. That's what he was offering forward. So I don't put a lot of blame around him. But the issue is other people are picking that up and saying this will happen. So just recall that as we're approaching this, there's going to be a lot of people that they're going to try and continue to feast on fear, disinformation, which we're going to get into, and trying to rile you up. And why do they try and rile you up? Because it gets you to click on a post,
and it
on
gets
a video.
You to share.
Yeah, and it gets you to share it. So it's sensationalism just for the sake. Now, there are plenty of things in Canada right now that are sensationalist enough without fabricating things and embellishing.